34-10. That's the final score from Chicago. That's not even the part that's actually hurting Shedeur Sanders right now. The part that's hurting is what came after. A national analyst calling him one of the biggest losers of the entire early preseason. A panel of league executives already ranking him dead last among every starting caliber quarterback in football. And now, 6 days out from Buffalo, Sanders doesn't just need a good game. He needs to change the entire conversation happening about him right now. Let's get into exactly what's going on. Saturday. Soldier Field. Watson starts, plays most of the first half. Sanders comes in for the third quarter. Browns get demolished, 34-10. Ugly final score, ugly optics for an offense that's supposed to be finding real answers this preseason. But here's what actually matters more than the scoreboard. Sanders threw an interception late in the game, and within hours, national outlets were already using that single play to build an entire narrative around him. Bleacher Report's Gary Davenport specifically named Sanders one of the biggest losers of the entire early preseason slate. Not just a rough outing. A loser. That's the label attached to his name after one preseason game. And it gets worse before it gets better. Just days before this game even kicked off, a panel of NFL coaches and executives had already ranked Sanders dead last. 35th out of 35 starting caliber quarterbacks across the entire league. Their reasoning cited poor rookie analytics and real concerns about his overall play style. Read that again. Not one bad game. A league-wide panel, before this preseason even started, already placing him at the very bottom of the entire quarterback rankings in football. So think about the pressure stacking up here. You've got outside evaluators who already wrote him off before a single preseason snap. Then you've got the actual snap itself, an interception in a blowout loss, landing right on top of that existing narrative like gasoline on a fire. Now here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because Sanders didn't wait for reporters to ask him about any of this. He got ahead of it himself. Before that Bears game even happened, Sanders issued something close to a public apology, addressing the exact kind of separation narrative that's followed him for years. I dislike when there's a lot of separation, and when something gets between the team and people get painted a certain way and all this different type of stuff, Sanders said. Think about that timing. He's addressing outside perception before the game even kicks off, almost like he already knew exactly what kind of coverage was coming his way regardless of how he actually played. And after the game, when reporters pushed him on the interception specifically, he didn't hide from it either. Any decision I make, I know is the right decision, I just didn't execute the decision, but the right decision was made. So every day I look at my decision making. That's a quarterback under real, mounting outside pressure, still choosing honest self-reflection over deflection. Let's actually give this game a fair, complete look though, because the coverage hasn't exactly been balanced. One fan online put it about as directly as anybody has. Literally judging this kid off the throw is crazy. He looked solid for 3 drives he had, looked better in the pocket, did good with his reads, just had a bad overthrow. That's not some blind defender either. That's somebody who actually watched the tape and noticed what the highlight reel headlines conveniently left out. Even Todd Monken, the guy actually running this competition, didn't come away from that game with the harsh, dismissive red national media pushed out within hours. There were some things operationally that I know we can clean up, but I thought at moments we threw the ball well, and that's what we needed to see, Monken said postgame. Notice what he actually said there. Things to clean up, sure. But also moments of real, quality throwing. That's a far more balanced take than biggest loser of the preseason. So why does the outside narrative feel so much harsher than what the people actually coaching him are saying? Because Sanders has been living under this exact kind of magnified scrutiny since before he ever played a single NFL snap. Every mistake gets amplified. Every rough patch becomes a headline. That's been the pattern of his entire career, dating back to college, through that dramatic draft slide, into his rookie year, and it hasn't slowed down one bit heading into year 2. Now let's talk about what's actually coming next, because this is where everything gets real. Buffalo. August 22nd. Sanders starts. He gets the entire first half this time, not just a third-quarter relief appearance. On top of that, Cleveland and Buffalo are running joint practices that same week, meaning Sanders gets extended, live reps against a completely different opposing defense before that game ever kicks off. Monken laid out the full plan himself. The plan was always to get through the Bills game, switch up who was going to start, who was going to play in the second half, and then we'll go from there. Every day is important, he added. That's a coach still treating this as a genuinely open, ongoing evaluation, not something already decided in Chicago. Think about what that actually means for Sanders specifically. This isn't just another preseason snap. This is his real answer to everybody who's already written him off. The anonymous panel that ranked him last. The national analyst who called him a loser after one game. Every single one of those narratives gets a direct, live response the moment he steps onto that field against Buffalo. Let's also think about the stakes sitting underneath all of this, because it's bigger than just one preseason game. Remember, this entire competition is building toward that final preseason start against New England, the one that basically hands out the Week 1 job. If Sanders comes out against Buffalo and delivers a clean, sharp, mistake-free performance, that harsh outside narrative starts flipping fast. If he struggles again, that biggest loser label and that dead last ranking start looking a lot less like premature judgment and a lot more like an accurate read. That's the real weight on this game. Not just proving he belongs in this competition. Proving that one rough interception in a blowout loss doesn't define who he actually is as a quarterback heading into his second season. Here's something else worth sitting with too. Go back to his rookie year, a game against these same Bills, a tough 4-point loss. After that game, reporters tried to bait him into criticizing his own coaching staff over a fourth down decision. He shut it down immediately. I know you can't be asking me that question, man. Come on, man. We can't see that, that's like the thing. If we want to change the narrative, change the franchise, if we want to help, we got to speak life. That's the same version of Sanders showing up again right now, refusing to let outside noise pull him into anything that looks like division or excuse-making. That consistency matters. Whether the week is going great or genuinely brutal, his public response has stayed remarkably steady. No blaming teammates. No blaming coaches. No blaming conditions beyond a simple, honest explanation for his own mistakes. Let's also think about how much scrutiny actually gets applied unevenly here, because that's worth examining honestly. Every quarterback throws bad interceptions in blowout preseason losses. That's genuinely common, part of what preseason football is for, working through mistakes before they carry real regular season weight. But when Sanders does it, it becomes a national headline and a biggest loser label. When other young quarterbacks around the league do the exact same thing in their own preseason openers, it barely registers outside their own local market. That gap in coverage intensity isn't necessarily proof of bias in every single case, but it is a real, measurable pattern that's followed him specifically since before he ever set foot on an NFL field. It's also worth examining that anonymous league ranking a little more critically, because these panels compile their votes well ahead of publication. That means a huge portion of the input shaping his dead last ranking was almost certainly locked in based on last year's rookie tape, not anything from this actual training camp or this specific preseason opener. 10 interceptions across 7 rookie starts left a real impression on evaluators around the league, and reputations built on that kind of data don't disappear overnight, even while the player attached to them is out there actively working to change the story in real time. And that's exactly why this Buffalo start carries so much weight. It's not just about Sanders proving something to Monken or to his own teammates. It's about giving every one of those anonymous evaluators actual, current tape that contradicts whatever they already believe. Every clean drive, every accurate throw, every composed possession chips away just a little more at a reputation that's currently working against him. Let's dig even deeper into what that biggest loser label actually means, because a phrase like that carries real weight once it starts circulating. Bleacher Report is a genuinely major national platform, one of the most read sports outlets in the entire country. When a writer there specifically singles out a player using that exact word, loser, it doesn't stay contained to one article. It gets clipped, shared, quoted, turned into its own standalone headline across dozens of smaller outlets and social media accounts within hours. That's exactly what happened here. One preseason interception, in a blowout that had plenty of other problems beyond just quarterback play, turned into a defining label attached to Sanders' name across the entire football media landscape. And here's the thing worth sitting with. Labels like that are incredibly hard to shake once they attach themselves to a player, especially a young one still building his professional reputation. Fair or not, that kind of framing follows a player around, gets referenced in future articles, gets brought up by analysts months later even after the player has clearly moved past whatever specific mistake originally triggered it. That's exactly why this Buffalo start matters so much beyond just the football itself. It's Sanders' first real opportunity to make that specific label look premature and outdated rather than accurate. Let's also think through why that anonymous executive's ranking landed with this much force too, because context matters here. These kinds of league-wide surveys typically get compiled through informal conversations across front offices, scouts comparing notes, coaches sharing impressions from film study and pro days. When 50 different voices from across the league all land on the same conclusion, dead last, that's not one person's hot take, that's a genuine consensus forming among the exact people whose job is evaluating quarterback talent for a living. That consensus carries real weight in how the rest of the league perceives him, how future opponents scout him, even how his own organization's front office thinks about long-term roster planning at the position. But here's the honest counterpoint too, because it's worth being fair about the limitations of that same ranking. Rankings like this get locked in well before publication, meaning most of what shaped the dead last verdict almost certainly reflects last season's rookie tape rather than anything happening in this specific training camp or preseason. 10 interceptions across 7 rookie starts left a real, lasting impression. That impression doesn't just evaporate the moment a player starts having better practices under a new coaching staff. Reputation, especially a bad one, tends to lag behind actual, current improvement, sometimes by months, sometimes by an entire season. That's exactly the gap Sanders is fighting against right now. The tape from this specific training camp, the 4 months of praised growth from Monken, the operational improvements specifically noted by his own coaching staff, none of that fully shows up yet in how outside evaluators are talking about him. It takes sustained, visible, in-game production to actually shift a reputation this deeply entrenched, and one preseason opener, especially one that ended in an interception during a blowout loss, simply wasn't enough to move that needle in his favor. Let's also think about how this specific kind of pressure affects a young quarterback's actual on-field decision-making, because it's a real psychological factor worth considering. Knowing that every single throw is going to get measured against a biggest loser label and a dead last ranking creates a genuinely difficult mental environment to operate in. There's a real risk of pressing too hard, trying to force a statement play specifically to silence critics, which paradoxically often leads to exactly the kind of mistake that reinforces the very narrative a player is trying to escape. The quarterbacks who handle this kind of sustained outside pressure best are usually the ones who can compartmentalize it completely, playing within their own structure and trusting their process rather than trying to manufacture a highlight reel out of sheer desperation to prove doubters wrong. Based on everything we've heard from Sanders directly, his calm, measured postgame comments, his consistent refusal to blame anyone else, his stated daily focus on simply reviewing and improving his own decision-making, there's a real case that he's already built exactly that kind of mental discipline. Whether that discipline actually translates into a cleaner, sharper performance against Buffalo remains to be seen, but the foundation, at least based on how he's talked about this entire situation, appears to be there. There's one more layer worth adding here too, because it connects this entire story back to something bigger than just Sanders individually. This franchise has been chasing quarterback stability for the better part of 2 decades now, and every single evaluation happening this preseason carries the weight of that entire history. When outside media rushes to label a young quarterback a loser after one rough preseason outing, it's not just about that player, it reflects a fan base and a media environment that's been burned so many times before, they're primed to expect disappointment rather than patience. That context doesn't excuse unfair coverage, but it does explain why the reaction to this specific interception felt so much bigger than the play itself actually warranted. It's also worth thinking about what a strong response against Buffalo would actually mean for the broader trajectory of this competition, not just for Sanders' individual reputation. If he delivers a clean, composed first half against a legitimate opposing defense, backed up by a full week of joint practice reps beforehand, that's exactly the kind of complete data set Monken has said he's building toward before making any real decision. It wouldn't just quiet outside critics, it would give this coaching staff genuinely strong evidence to weigh directly against whatever Watson produces in his own next opportunity. So here's where this actually leaves things heading into Buffalo. Sanders isn't just fighting for reps anymore. He's fighting against a narrative that's already been written about him by people who evaluate quarterbacks for a living. A dead last ranking. A biggest loser label. Real, public skepticism piling up fast. And he's got one live start, plus a full week of joint practices, to start writing a completely different story. Let's also think about the broader competitive landscape Sanders is navigating right now, because it's not a simple two-man race anymore either. Dillon Gabriel remains in that quarterback room too, quietly building his own case throughout camp, and every stumble from either Watson or Sanders theoretically opens a door for him as well. That third option sitting in the background adds even more urgency to this Buffalo start. A strong performance doesn't just need to beat the narrative building against him externally, it needs to keep pace with whatever quiet momentum Gabriel might be building simultaneously, out of the spotlight but very much still in this competition. It's also worth remembering just how compressed this entire evaluation window actually is. 3 preseason games. That's it. That's the entire sample size this coaching staff has to work with before making arguably the most important decision of their inaugural season together. Every practice, every preseason series, every postgame quote gets magnified specifically because there's so little time and so much riding on getting this call right. That's exactly why a single interception in a blowout loss generated this much reaction in the first place, not because it was necessarily that significant on its own, but because the window to prove otherwise is genuinely this narrow. Does one game change everything? No. But does it matter? Enormously. Because right now, every single throw against Buffalo isn't just about winning a job anymore. It's about proving an entire panel of league evaluators wrong. So what do you think? Is Shedeur Sanders about to silence every single one of these doubters against Buffalo, or does that Bears performance confirm exactly what the skeptics have been saying all along? Drop your take in the comments. Does he bounce back, or does the pressure finally catch up to him? Disclaimer, this video is for entertainment purposes only, based on publicly available reports and ongoing developments. No disrespect is intended toward any individual, team, or organization mentioned.